I used to work as a camp counselor when I was younger. Back when I was still in high school, it was just a summer job to get me out of the house, but I kept coming back for a few years. I liked the quiet, the woods, the smell of the trees in the morning when the air was still cold, and even the dumb pranks kids pulled that we all knew about. What I really liked, though, was sitting around the campfire at night, scaring the absolute hell out of them with stories. One of my favorites wasn't even my own. It was something one of my Cub Scout leaders had told me when I was just a kid, maybe 7 or 8. He had a gift for telling stories. Not fancy or dramatic, but simple and heavy, like he was remembering it more than telling it. It wasn't a ghost story, not really. No monsters in the dark. It was just a story about people, which I've come to think are scarier than any make-believe creature anyway. It took place back in pioneer times. A man and his wife had packed up everything they owned and moved west. This was when people believed in manifest destiny, when the country was expanding and people thought there'd be gold in every river and fresh land for the taking. They weren't rich, just hopeful. They figured if they didn't strike it rich with gold, they'd at least find a good place to settle down, start a farm, build a life. Simple, honest work. After months of traveling, living out of a wagon, eating whatever dried food they'd brought with them, they finally found a place. It was beautiful. Rolling hills, a thick patch of woods nearby, and a stream not too far off. The land felt good under their boots. They made their decision. This was where they'd make their home. But winter was coming. They didn't have time to build anything fancy, so they put together a small shack, just enough to keep the wind out and the heat from a fire in. They knew it was going to be rough, but they weren't worried. The area was crawling with wildlife, deer, rabbits, squirrels. There'd be plenty to hunt, plenty to trap. They thought they'd get by, but sometimes the land has other ideas. The first month of winter was manageable. Cold, sure, but they'd stocked up some supplies before the first snow. They hunted when they could, and for a while the traps kept them fed. But then the cold got worse. The snow piled up higher. The animals stopped showing up. The traps came back empty day after day, and their supplies ran out. The cold out there wasn't the kind that you shake off. It wasn't even the kind that just stings your fingers and toes. Crept into your bones, slow and steady, and stayed there. They kept a fire going as best they could, but they were running out of wood too. Day after day, they sat in that shack, wrapped in every scrap of cloth they had, stomachs empty, feeling that cold sink deeper into their skin. Hunger does strange things to a person. First, it's just pain. You feel the gnawing in your gut, like a deep, twisting ache that never quite goes away. Then it starts to mess with your head. You get lightheaded. You think slow. You start to notice every little sound, every creak of the shack, every whistle of wind through the boards. Time gets slow, stretchy. You stop counting days. You start counting breaths. The wife took it harder than the husband. Maybe it was because she was smaller, had less body fat to burn. Maybe her mind was more fragile. Maybe it was just bad luck. She started talking nonsense, laughing when there was nothing funny, crying at nothing. He did his best to keep her warm, to keep her sane, but he could see it slipping. One morning, when the wind wasn't as vicious, the man decided he had to do something. Staying in the shack meant dying. There was no other way around it. So he bundled up, wrapped his scarf around his face, and went out into the woods. He told himself he wouldn't come back until he had something to show for it. Food, wood, anything. The days outside were brutal. He built little shelters out of sticks and brush, lit tiny fires when he could. He didn't sleep much, just kept moving, watching, hunting. His hands were numb, his lips cracked and bleeding. His breath came out in white clouds that disappeared too fast. Every time he thought about quitting, about turning back, he thought about his wife, alone in that shack, losing her mind. It was on the third day he saw it. A rabbit, fat, slow, probably sick, but he didn't care. He raised his musket, aimed as best he could with shaking hands, and fired. The shot rang out like thunder in the stillness. He hit it clean. With the rabbit slung over his shoulder, he found new energy. His legs moved faster. His mind cleared. He could already picture the stew, the smell of cooked meat filling the shack. Maybe they'd make it through after all. But there was something wrong as he got closer to the shack. The feeling. He couldn't say what it was, just a weight in his gut, heavier than hunger. He stopped a few yards from the door, listening. The wind whistled through the trees. Snow crunched under his boots. But there were no other sounds. No crackle of fire. No shuffling inside. It was too quiet. He pushed the door open. The air inside hit him like a wall. Cold, thick, sour. The fire was out. The inside of the shack was gray, lit only by the pale light creeping through the cracks in the wood. For a second, he didn't see her. The room was so still, so empty, it was like she wasn't there. Then he looked down. She was on the floor, or what was left of her. Skin pale as wax, her arms pulled tight against her body. But it was her hands, or what used to be her hands, that froze him in place. The fingers were gone, gnawed down to bone. Shiny white bones where flesh should have been. The ends jagged, chewed. His eyes followed the damage up her arms. More bone. Strips of skin peeled away. Raw muscle exposed like meat in a butcher's window. Her face was worse. Her lips were gone, ripped clean off. The teeth beneath glistened wet and red. Her cheeks were hollowed, sunken in, but her mouth was pulled wide, like she was still trying to chew. For a long moment, he just stood there. The rabbit slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. The thing on the floor twitched, moved, raised its head toward him. The jaw worked, chomping up and down, slow and steady, as if the act of chewing was the only thing keeping her, or it, alive. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His brain tried to catch up, tried to tell him this was his wife. The woman he'd traveled with, shared a bed with, but that part of her was gone, eaten away like the flesh on her bones. The air was too cold. His lungs hurt. His legs finally listened, carrying him backwards out the door, into the snow, into the wind. He didn't stop moving. He didn't look back. His mind was blank. There was no plan, no destination, just a way. That winter was one of the worst on record. They found his shack months later, when the thaw started. The story goes that when the search party found her, there was barely anything left of her body, just bone, clean and picked over like an animal carcass. There was no sign of the husband. People say he must have kept walking, kept running, maybe even died out there in the snow. That's the story. No ghosts, no monsters, just hunger, just the cold, just the way a person's mind can crack when the body gets too weak. It's not hard to believe. Not really. Back then, out in the middle of nowhere, there was no one to save you. You either survived or you didn't. I told that story around the campfire more than a few times. And every time I did, when the kids leaned in close, waiting for a jump scare or a ghost to pop out, I'd let the fire crackle, let the silence hang thick, and then remind them, it's not what's out there that'll get you. It's what happens when you're stuck, cold, starving, and alone. That's what'll really eat you alive. Even now, years later, I still think about that story when I'm out in the woods. When the fire burns low and the night gets cold. I think about the sound of teeth clicking in an empty shack. That story isn't scary because it's made up. It's scary because it could be real. And maybe once it was. I was supposed to be out there for 3 days. Just 3 days. A solo camping trip, something I had done before, but this time I wanted to push a little further. Not too extreme, but off the beaten path enough that I wouldn't hear the sound of cars or see groups of loud campers. It was early September, not too cold yet, but summer had faded. The days were still warm enough, but at night, the temperature dropped fast. I checked the weather a dozen times before I left. Clear skies, no storms, maybe some wind. Nothing to worry about. The spot I picked was in a national forest, about 5 miles from the nearest maintained trail. I had mapped it out, planned my route, packed my gear carefully. Tent, sleeping bag, food, water filter, first aid kit, bear spray, knife, fire starter, all of it. I even left my itinerary with 2 friends, like you're supposed to. I wasn't stupid. The first day was fine. Hike in, find the spot, set up camp. The forest was quiet, just the way I like it. No human noise, just the wind moving through the trees, birds flitting around, the occasional rustle of something small in the undergrowth. That kind of quiet gets into your bones in a good way. By nightfall, I had a small fire going. Nothing big, just enough to boil some water for dinner. The stars came out, and with no light pollution, they were bright and sharp. It felt good to be out there, alone but not lonely. I slept fine that first night. The next morning, I woke up early. The air was cold enough that I could see my breath, but the sun came up fast and warmed everything up. I spent most of the day exploring around the area, just walking, taking it slow. I wasn't in a hurry. I was careful not to get too far from camp. Land can look the same in every direction if you're not paying attention. Around mid-afternoon, I noticed something odd. I was maybe half a mile from my tent, moving through a small clearing, when I saw a shape in the trees. At first, I thought it was an old tree stump. The color was off, though. It wasn't dark brown or gray like old wood. It had a pale, dirty look, like old canvas. I got closer, slow and quiet. It wasn't a tree stump. It was a backpack. An old one, not like mine. This one was faded with a few torn straps. It had been there a while. Nature had started claiming it. Moss, dirt, leaves piled around it. I didn't touch it right away. I looked around, trying to see if anyone else was nearby. Nothing, just trees and silence. Curiosity got the better of me. I crouched down and checked the pack. It was mostly empty. Some shredded fabric inside, maybe an old shirt, a rusted-out tin cup. Nothing of real use. No wallet, no ID, no clues. The weird thing was it wasn't rotted through. Weathered, yes, but not destroyed. It hadn't been there for decades, maybe a couple of years at most. That made me pause. Who leaves a backpack like that and doesn't come back for it? I stood up and looked around again. Still nothing. That was when I got the first real jolt of unease. Not fear, not yet, but that feeling when something's off and your gut knows it before your brain does. I decided to head back to camp. The rest of the day passed quietly. I made dinner, kept the fire small again, and went through my usual night routine. But the woods felt different. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of quiet where you start hearing things that might not actually be there. Small snaps of twigs, a soft rustle that keeps repeating. You tell yourself it's animals, wind, normal forest sounds. That night, I had a hard time falling asleep. I don't know what time it was when I heard it. Deep into the night, long after the fire had burned down to coals. A sound that was too heavy to be a rabbit or a squirrel. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching over dry leaves. At first, I didn't move. I laid still in my sleeping bag, ears straining. Could have been a deer, could have been a bear, but it didn't sound like either. The steps weren't clumsy or rushed. They were careful, measured, like someone trying not to make noise but still failing just enough to be heard. They stopped near my tent. For a long time, there was nothing, just my own breathing trying to stay quiet. Then I heard a faint scraping sound. Not claws, not teeth, fabric on fabric. Maybe fingers brushing against the side of the tent. I didn't have a gun, just a knife and bear spray. I stayed still, my hand wrapped around the handle of the spray. The sound stopped. More silence. Then the footsteps moved away, slow, back into the trees. I stayed awake until the first light. When I finally unzipped the tent and stepped out, the forest looked the same as always. Calm, innocent. But when I checked around my tent, I found footprints. Human. Not boots, but old, beat-up sneakers. The tread was barely there. The prints came from the direction of the clearing where I found the backpack. They circled my tent twice. That was enough for me. I broke camp fast, stuffing everything back into my pack without much care. I knew the way back. 5 miles wasn't much. I could be out by noon if I kept a good pace. But the forest didn't want to let go so easy. About an hour into the hike, I started seeing more footprints, crossing the trail off to the sides, sometimes even doubling back. Whoever it was, they knew the forest better than I did. They weren't following me in a straight line. They were flanking, pacing me through the trees. I picked up my pace. The weirdest part was never actually seeing them. You'd think out there, In the daylight, you'd catch a glimpse of movement, a flash of color, a shadow. But there was nothing, just signs, footprints, a broken branch that wasn't there yesterday, a stone turned over in fresh mud. By the time I hit the last mile, I was half jogging. I didn't stop. I didn't drink water. I didn't look back. My breath was loud in my ears, and every time I thought about pausing, I imagined those slow, deliberate footsteps behind me. When I finally made it back to the dirt road where my car was parked, I felt like my lungs were going to burst. The sight of the vehicle was like a jolt of electricity. I threw my pack into the back seat, jumped in, and locked the doors immediately. I sat there for a few minutes trying to slow my breathing. That was when I saw it. In the tree line, maybe 30 yards back, something moved. Not toward me, not even away, just standing there, still as a statue. I couldn't see the face. The trees cast too many shadows, but I could make out the shape of a person. Thin, wearing old clothes that didn't fit right. One arm hung down, but the other seemed to be holding something long and narrow. A stick, maybe, or something worse. They didn't follow when I started the engine. They just stood there, watching as I drove away. I didn't stop until I hit pavement. When I got home, I took everything out of my car, gear and all. I went through it piece by piece. Nothing was missing, but stuffed into the side pocket of my backpack, tucked in where I never would have put it, was that same rusted tin cup from the old backpack I found in the woods. I never put it there. I never took it. I stared at it for a long time before finally throwing it out. I haven't gone back since. It's not that I'm scared of the woods. The woods didn't do anything wrong. It's the people you might find out there, or the people who find you. And next time, maybe they don't stop at circling your tent. I always liked camping with friends. It was simple. You bring a tent, some food, a cooler of beer, and you sit around a fire telling dumb stories until it gets too cold. Nothing fancy. We'd done it since high school. Every year, one weekend in fall, we'd pick a spot and head out. It became a tradition, and none of us ever thought it would be the kind of thing we'd regret. That year, we picked a small campground near a state forest. It wasn't a full park, more like a primitive site with no hookups or amenities. Just a few clearings, fire rings, and a dirt road leading in. No lights, no ranger station, no cell service. That was part of the charm. There were 5 of us, me, Dylan, Mark, Jake, and Ryan. We'd all been friends for years, but now with jobs and relationships pulling us in different directions, these trips were one of the few things that stuck. We planned to camp 2 nights. The first night was normal. We got there in the afternoon, set up our tents, gathered some wood, cooked hot dogs over the fire, cracked beers, and sat around laughing. It got cold fast once the sun dipped behind the trees, but we were used to that. The sky was clear, stars everywhere, and the only sounds were the fire popping and the occasional rustle in the woods. That night, I remember thinking how peaceful it was. No traffic, no buzzing phones, just that deep, empty silence you only get far away from everything. The second day, we hiked a bit, but mostly hung around camp. By evening, we had a good fire going again. More food, more beer, more stories. It was the kind of night where you don't look at your watch. Just sit and let the hours slip by. Around midnight, we called it. The fire was dying down, the air was cold, and we were all ready to sleep it off. That was when things changed. I woke up sometime in the night, not sure what time. The fire had burned out, and everything was dark. My tent was cold. The air felt sharp in my lungs. At first, I didn't know why I was awake. There wasn't any noise, no movement. Then I heard it. Not loud, not close, just a faint, steady crunch of footsteps in the leaves. Not an animal. Animals move in quick bursts, stop, sniff, scurry. This was slow, heavy, measured. Someone was walking through the woods near our camp. I stayed still, listening. The footsteps weren't coming closer. They circled, wide loops around us. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear the pattern. Leaves crushing, a pause, then more steps. My heartbeat felt loud in my chest. I waited, hoping the noise would stop, but it didn't. I thought maybe it was a late hiker or someone from another site, But there weren't other sights this far out. Just us. After a while, the footsteps faded. I let myself breathe again, but sleep didn't come easy. In the morning, everyone looked tired. We didn't talk about it. Maybe we all heard it, maybe not. Either way, the mood was different. We ate a quiet breakfast. No one suggested staying another night. We all started packing up without saying much. That's when Dylan noticed it. About 30 yards from our camp, there was a tree with something hanging on it. Piece of rope. Old, frayed, tied into a loop. A noose. It wasn't there the day before. None of us would have missed it. It swung gently in the breeze, creaking as it twisted. We all stood there staring at it for a long time. No one said a word, but we knew what it meant. Someone had been near our camp. Someone who wanted us to see that. We packed faster after that. Tents down, gear thrown into bags, fire pit scattered. No one wanted to be there anymore. On the way out, as we hiked back to the dirt road, we saw more. Along the path, small piles of rocks, stacked deliberately. We hadn't seen them on the way in. Each pile was neat, 3 or 4 stones balanced carefully. Every 50 yards or so, another pile. Felt like a trail of markers, like someone had left them for us to find. We didn't stop walking. When we reached the cars, we didn't waste time loading up. Just threw things in and got moving. But before we left, I noticed something on my windshield. A smear, pale and greasy, like a handprint dragged across the glass. It wasn't there when we arrived. It was the same on Ryan's truck. The others didn't check. We drove back to town in silence. No one ever admitted to hearing the footsteps. No one brought up the noose or the rocks. But we didn't go camping together after that. It wasn't spoken out loud, but the message was clear. Someone had been out there with us, watching, walking circles around us in the dark, leaving signs we couldn't ignore. We'd always thought we were careful, always checked for other campers, always made sure we weren't bothering anyone. But out there, far enough from help, all that doesn't matter. Some people don't care about rules or reason. Some people just want to scare you. And it worked. Years later, when we pass each other in town or grab a quick beer, it still sits there between us. That last trip, the footsteps, the rope, the handprints. I've gone camping since then, but never with the same ease. Never with that same blind trust. It was a simple thing. No dramatic attack, no ghost story. Just someone choosing to remind us how alone we really were out there. And that was enough. I had always liked camping alone. The silence, the fresh air, the way nature feels untouched. I liked the challenge of it too. Packing light, relying on myself, knowing I had to think clearly. I never thought camping could turn into something truly frightening, but that fall trip changed everything. I decided to go out to a spot in the mountains a few hours from home. It was late September, and the trees were just starting to turn yellow and red. The kind of place with a few dirt roads, a couple of hiking trails, and no cell phone signal. I liked that. I packed my gear the night before. A good tent, sleeping bag rated for cold weather, a small stove, water filter, and enough food for 3 days. I brought my dog, Rex, a quiet Labrador mix who never made a fuss but kept watch when it mattered. Rex had been with me on several solo trips before, so he knew the drill. I left early the next morning, driving until the pavement ended, then hiking the last couple miles to my campsite. The air was cool and crisp, and the forest was still alive with the last buzz of summer insects and distant bird songs. The clearing I picked was perfect. Flat ground near a small creek, surrounded by tall pines. There was a faint smell of damp earth and moss. No one else around, just me and Rex. I set up camp slowly. I put up the tent, tied my food bag to a high branch to keep bears away, filtered water from the creek, and built a small fire ring with rocks. I kept the fire small since it was daylight and I didn't want to attract unwanted attention. By afternoon, I was ready to relax. I took off my boots, stretched, and let Rex roam a bit while keeping close. I had a book with me, but mostly I watched the trees and listened to the creek. As evening came, I made dinner over the stove, something simple: dehydrated chili and instant coffee. Rex got a bit of canned dog food. I sat near the fire, feeling calm and content. The light was soft, and the forest started to darken. I crawled into the tent early that night, feeling tired but peaceful. Rex curled up at the foot of the sleeping bag, already half asleep. I left my hand out, as I always did, so Rex could lick it before settling down. It was a little ritual between us, something that helped me relax. The night was quiet. I fell asleep thinking about the day. I woke up suddenly. I didn't hear a noise. It was more like a sense. Something wasn't right. It was pitch dark inside the tent, but I could see the faint outline of Rex, who was alert, ears up, staring at the tent wall. My heart beat faster. I kept still, not wanting to make any noise. Then I felt it. A wet touch on the tent fabric, right where my hand had been just before I fell asleep. It was soft, slow, deliberate. I froze. It wasn't Rex. Rex wouldn't lick the outside of the tent. I held my breath. Outside the tent, the soft scrape of footsteps. No crunch of leaves, just a quiet shuffle. The steps stopped. For a long moment, nothing. Then the fabric pushed in a little, like a finger poking. My mind raced. Who was out there? Why? I stayed still, waiting, listening. The finger traced down the side of the tent slowly, and then the licking started again. Wet and slow. It was close, just outside the tent wall. Rex growled low but didn't bark. I felt trapped inside my own tent, the walls thin and fragile. Then the footsteps moved away, slow and cautious. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The first light I packed quickly. I moved with purpose, heart pounding. When I went to retrieve my food bag, I saw footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, muddy but clear. They circled around the tree I had hung the bag on, then headed straight to my tent. I didn't look for more. I took my pack and moved fast down the trail. On the way back, I spotted someone watching from behind a tree across the creek. Barefoot, dirty clothes, thin and pale. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I kept my head down and kept walking. When I finally reached my car, I noticed my side mirror was cracked. Not badly, but enough to catch my attention. When I wiped it off, there was a wet smear across the glass, like someone had licked it. I never reported it. I never went back. I still sleep with the lights on, and every night I wonder if that person is still out there, waiting for someone else to camp alone. Started as a joke. The kind of stupid joke that makes you roll your eyes, but still makes you laugh because it's harmless. We had this guy with us, a new friend of a friend. None of us knew him that well, but somehow, there he was, standing by the fire, stirring his instant coffee with a stick. Someone had made the joke, LOL, so you're saying he's a plant? Meaning, like an undercover guy. Not a literal plant, a mole, a snitch. But nobody really believed that. He was just quiet, kept to himself. Still, it stuck. For the rest of the night, little comments here and there, mostly as a way to poke fun. It was a planned trip. One of those things you organize weeks in advance. Map out the route, pack everything neatly. We weren't new to this. All of us had camped dozens of times before. It was supposed to be a simple 2-night stay, hike in, set up camp, enjoy the time away from phones and work. Nothing too deep into the wilderness, but far enough where you'd think twice before walking out alone at night. The first night was normal. Tents went up. Fire got going. Freeze-dried meals cooked. People laughed, shared stories. The guy, I'll call him Mark, though that's not his real name, sat on the edge of the group, saying little, but he wasn't doing anything weird. Maybe just a loner. Some people don't like small talk. No crime in that. But it didn't stop the jokes. After dinner, people started to head to their tents. I stayed up to enjoy the last of the fire's warmth. Mark stayed up too, sitting across from me, staring at the flames like they had all the answers. Not talking, just sitting there. I wasn't in the mood to force conversation, so I let it be. When the fire died down, I got up, stretched, and went to my tent. He stayed sitting there in the dark. Next morning, everything seemed fine. People were getting their coffee, boiling water, stretching sore backs. Mark was already up when I got out of my tent, standing by a tree, looking out into the woods. Again, not strange by itself, but he was very still. Not moving, not shifting weight, not adjusting his clothes. Just standing there, like he'd been planted in the dirt. The plant joke came back to mind, and it made me smirk. Harmless, right? We packed up day packs for a light hike. Left the heavy stuff at camp. Mark came along. He stayed at the back of the group, walking slow, eyes moving through the trees, but he didn't talk to anyone. A couple of the guys cracked jokes when he wasn't looking, pretending to check his roots or see if he was absorbing sunlight. Dumb stuff like that, but it felt like the mood was shifting. What had been a harmless joke started to feel like unease, like maybe people were laughing a little too hard at it. It wasn't that he did anything specific. He was just there, always watching, never reacting. You'd catch him looking right at you, but when you made eye contact, he wouldn't look away. Most people glance away when they're caught staring. He didn't. He just kept looking, not in a threatening way, not even a curious way, just blank. We got back to camp mid-afternoon. People spread out, some taking naps, some gathering firewood. Mark disappeared for a while. Nobody really noticed at first. We weren't attached at the hip. People wandered off to pee or stretch their legs. But after a while, it was clear he wasn't around. No big deal, but still. I started paying attention, looking for him between the trees. Calling out wasn't really a thing, since we were all kind of spread out and calling someone's name would feel weird for a grown man who just wanted to be left alone. But I kept an eye out. He showed back up around sunset. Same as before. Calm, quiet, no explanation. Just drifted back into camp like he never left. People didn't say anything, but I could feel it. Everyone noticed. Everyone was wondering. That night, I stayed up again, watching the fire. Mark did too. This time, he wasn't sitting. He was standing behind his chair, fingers lightly gripping the top of it, just watching the flames. Couldn't shake it. The stillness. The way he moved so little, you'd think he was trying not to disturb the air. It was stupid. I knew it was stupid. Just a quiet guy. But my brain kept poking at me. Why was he even here? None of us knew him. He came with Mike, but Mike barely knew him. Some coworker, he'd said. I started wondering what Mark even did for a living. What kind of guy comes out to the woods with a bunch of people he barely knows and doesn't try to fit in at all? The jokes felt less funny now. When I went to my tent that night, I made a point of watching where Mark went. He didn't go to his tent right away. He stayed by the fire until it burned down to glowing coals. Then he moved, not to his tent. He walked slowly out toward the tree line, past where the firelight reached. I watched him go, expecting him to veer off to his tent, but he kept walking into the dark. That's when the unease became something more. I didn't sleep well. Every little crack of a branch or rustle of leaves had me holding my breath. I was listening for footsteps, for breathing. Nothing. Morning came. His tent was zipped up. Looked normal. He could have come back late. Maybe he just liked walking around in the dark. People are weird. I kept telling myself that. People are weird. But then we noticed his boots, caked in mud. Not the dry, dusty dirt from our area. Thick, wet mud. We hadn't seen any wet ground on our hike. The streams were low, the banks dry. You'd have to go way off trail to find a spot like that. Nobody said anything, but we noticed. That last day was tense. People packed faster than normal. No more jokes. No more poking fun. Everyone was just ready to get moving. Mark acted the same as always. Calm, quiet, watching. The hike out was long. Almost 5 hours back to the trailhead. Mark stayed at the back again. I kept looking over my shoulder. Not because I thought he'd do something, but because I couldn't stop myself. He was always just far enough back that you couldn't hear his steps, but you could feel him there. About halfway out, we passed another group coming in. They were talking loud, making noise, laughing. Normal stuff. But when they got closer, I noticed one of them giving us a long look. He wasn't smiling. He was scanning us, face serious. His eyes landed on Mark, and for a split second, something passed over his face. Recognition? Surprise? He didn't say anything, just kept walking with his group. But that look, that was the moment it clicked for me. It wasn't some paranoid fantasy. Mark wasn't just a quiet guy. He was here for a reason. Maybe not a plant like the dumb joke suggested, but he was watching us, watching someone, maybe even waiting for something. That other guy recognized him, not as a friend, not in a good way. When we got to the parking lot, I expected him to split off. Maybe go to his car, maybe head out on his own. But he didn't. He stood by the cars watching us pack up. Not helping, not leaving. One by one, we got in our cars. People gave him awkward nods. Nobody offered a ride. Mike, the one who invited him, looked nervous, sweaty. He kept glancing at Mark like he didn't know what to do. In the end, Mark just stood there as we pulled out, standing still by the trailhead sign, not moving an inch, like he'd grown there. Driving back, nobody said much. My hands stayed tight on the wheel. I kept checking the rearview mirror, even though there was no reason to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd gotten close to something we weren't supposed to see. A few days later, I checked the news. Small story, hard to find. A body had been found not far from that trail. Buried shallow, found by accident. The article said it had been there for weeks. They didn't release a name, no suspects, but I remembered the mud on Mark's boots, the way that stranger looked at him, the way Mark never once seemed surprised by anything. I haven't been back to that area since. I don't think I will, because now, every time I think about it, the joke doesn't feel funny anymore. He wasn't a plant. He wasn't undercover. He wasn't playing games. He was just there, doing what he was there to do. And we left him there, watching, waiting for whoever was next. Camping has always been my way of escaping things. People, noise, responsibilities. Some people drink to take the edge off, some people run. I camp. Nothing feels more distant than sitting in the woods, hours away from the nearest grocery store, with nothing to do but breathe fresh air. That's why I took the trip. It was a solo trip. I had done a few of those before. Some people think it's risky, but for me, the risk was part of it. The place I picked this time was far out, one of those small, free-use campgrounds not many people know about. No running water, no cell service, no rangers checking up on you. Just an old dirt road leading into the forest, some clearings, and a few fire rings made of rocks. I packed light, brought a tent, sleeping bag, basic gear, and enough food for 2 nights. Simple. I didn't plan anything fancy. One thing I always make sure to bring is snacks. Doesn't sound important, but when you're out there by yourself, that small bag of chips or a few candy bars become a big deal. They're a comfort. This time, I had packed some jerky, a small bag of trail mix, and a couple of granola bars. It wasn't much, but it was enough to look forward to after setting up camp. I got there in the late afternoon. The road was rough, barely wide enough for my truck. Trees leaned in on both sides, thick and close. It felt like driving into a tunnel. When I finally pulled into the clearing, it was exactly what I wanted. Empty. Just a flat, dirt area with a few fire pits, surrounded by tall pines and brush. The nearest town was probably 20 miles away. I liked it that way. Setting up camp didn't take long. I pitched my tent close to the tree line for a little wind cover, gathered some deadfall for a fire, and made a small circle of rocks to contain it. The air smelled like pine needles and dirt. A few birds chirped here and there, but otherwise it was quiet. No cars, no people. Just the forest breathing slow and steady. After getting the fire going, I sat down on a log I dragged over. Dinner was simple, canned soup heated up over the fire. When you're out there, food tastes better. Maybe because you earn it. When the sun went down, the cold crept in. I had a light jacket, but I could feel the air getting sharper. The fire helped, but the woods swallowed up the heat quick. I pulled out the trail mix, peanuts, raisins, a few M&Ms, and just sat there, eating slowly, watching the flames. I should mention now, I'm not careless with food in the woods. I've read all the stories. Bears, raccoons, even coyotes. You don't leave food lying around. But that night, after I finished, I didn't feel like stringing up my food bag. The trees weren't ideal for it. Too thin, too spread out. I figured I'd just stash the rest of my snacks in the cab of my truck. Metal and glass between me and the critters. Good enough. By the time I crawled into my sleeping bag, the fire was down to glowing coals. The woods were silent, the kind of quiet where your own breath sounds loud. My body was tired, but my mind was awake. Every small crackle of a branch or rustle of leaves felt like something bigger. That's normal for the first night out. I must have dozed off because the sound woke me up hard. Not the wind, not an owl. It was the sound of something scraping metal. It took a second to place it. Then my stomach dropped. It was coming from the truck. At first, I told myself it was a raccoon, maybe a curious one pawing at the door, smelling the trail mix. But the noise kept going. A slow, deliberate sound, like nails dragging along the side of the door, pausing, then continuing. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I stayed still, listening. My tent was zipped up tight, but it felt paper thin. I couldn't see anything. I didn't want to make noise. Then I heard a thud, soft but heavy, like a palm slapping against glass. Another thud. Whoever it was, and by now I knew it wasn't an animal, was testing the truck. Probably trying the handles, seeing if they could get in. That's when I remembered I hadn't locked it. My chest tightened. My stupid mistake. Out here, I thought the woods were empty. I thought I was alone. The sound of the door handle rattling was soft, but clear. Click, click, click. Then a pause. Then more scraping. I felt my throat go dry. My gear, including my small hatchet, was outside next to the fire pit. No help to me now. The only thing I had was a small flashlight. Minutes passed, but the sounds didn't stop. Whoever it was, they were patient. I thought about what was in there. Just snacks. Jerky, trail mix, granola bars. Nothing worth stealing. But maybe that wasn't the point. The truck door creaked. A soft metal pop. I knew that sound. The latch giving way. He was inside. I could hear the shifting of weight, the springs of the seat as someone climbed in, the plastic rustle of bags. A pause, then chewing. Whoever it was, they were eating my food. It was such a simple thing, but it made my skin crawl. Sitting in the dark, knowing someone had broken into my truck not to steal, not to vandalize, but just to sit there and eat my food. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. The eating went on for what felt like forever. Slow, sloppy chewing, crackle of wrappers, then the sound of a plastic bottle tipping over. Eventually, the sounds stopped. No more chewing, no more movement. But I didn't hear the door open again. I didn't know if he was still in there, waiting, watching. I stayed in my tent until the sky began to lighten. Every sound outside made my heart jump, but nothing else happened. No more footsteps. No more metal scraping. When the first rays of morning hit the trees, I finally unzipped the tent. The air was cold. The fire pit was dark. My truck was 20 feet away, looking the same as it had last night. But when I got closer, I saw the smudges. Handprints. Greasy, dirty handprints on the driver's side door, on the handle, on the glass. Finger streaks along the metal where someone had dragged their hands. Inside, the snack wrappers were scattered. An empty jerky bag sat crumpled on the passenger seat. The trail mix was spilled across the floor. My water bottle had been knocked over, still rolling slightly with the slope. But there was nothing else. No person. No sign of who had been there. I checked the tires. All fine. The truck started on the first try. But something caught my eye. On the dashboard, someone had left a small pile of peanuts. Stacked carefully, 4 of them, like a tiny offering. It didn't make sense, but it told me one thing. Whoever had been there wasn't in a hurry. They had time to sit, eat, and leave me that little message. I packed up quick after that, threw everything in the bed of the truck, didn't bother folding the tent right, just wanted out. Driving back down that dirt road, every shadow between the trees felt like it was watching. The truck felt smaller. I kept checking the rear view, half expecting to see someone step out into the road behind me. I didn't stop until I hit pavement. When I got home, I washed the truck twice, scrubbed the handles, the seats, the glass. But I couldn't get rid of the feeling. It wasn't about the stolen snacks. It was about how easy it had been. out there, miles from anyone, in a place I thought was safe. All it took was one person, one stranger, deciding that my small bit of comfort, a bag of trail mix, a few pieces of jerky, was going to be his. And he didn't rush. He wasn't scared of being caught. He sat there in my truck, not 20 feet from where I slept, and ate. Slowly, deliberately, left his fingerprints like it meant nothing. That trip taught me something. Out there, the woods aren't dangerous because of bears or weather. They're dangerous because you're alone. Because someone can decide in the middle of the night that they want what you have. Not because they need it, just because they can. And you'll be too far from help to stop them. Now, when I camp, I lock everything. I bring better lights. I don't pick the empty places anymore. But I still think about that night. The sound of chewing in the dark. The handprints. The peanuts stacked neatly on the dash. All over a snack. And that's what scares me most. I had camped alone before, so this trip didn't seem like a big deal when I planned it. The location was one of those out-of-the-way places, not marked on official park maps, but known through old forums and word of mouth. Some called it Ridge Hollow, a long stretch of uneven ground carved out by old floods, flanked by steep wooded ridges on both sides. It wasn't a tourist spot, not even close. People said you could go a whole weekend there without seeing another person. That was exactly why I picked it. It was late October, cold but not winter cold yet. Leaves had already started to fall, giving the woods that dead, brittle look. Bare branches poking out like bones, ground covered in slick, wet leaves that hid ankle-twisting roots and rocks. Perfect camping weather if you don't mind the cold. I liked it better than summer. Fewer people, fewer bugs. I parked my truck near an old service road, shouldered my pack, and hiked in. The trail down to the hollow was narrow and steep. Erosion had chewed up big sections, leaving it half trail, half dry creek bed. My boots slipped a few times on loose rocks, but it was manageable. By the time I made it to the bottom, the ridges had closed in tight around me. It felt like being in a shallow bowl of earth, rimmed with trees that looked ready to tumble down. No cell service, of course. I expected that. I found a flat spot near the base of the North Ridge, just far enough from the trickle of water still running through the bottom of the hollow. It was a decent spot, open enough for the tent, but with plenty of cover. The ridges blocked most of the wind, and the air smelled of cold dirt and wet leaves. Not a bad setup. Setting up camp took no time. Tent, ground pad, sleeping bag, small fire ring made of rocks. Enough wood lying around for a good fire. I had packed simple food, jerky, trail mix, some instant soup, and a small camping stove. As the sun dropped, the hollow filled with shadows fast. The ridges blocked most of the sunset. What little light was left got swallowed by the trees. I sat by the fire, listening. Ridge Hollow was quiet, but not silent. Small cracks of twigs, rustling leaves, things moving. Probably raccoons or deer. Still, there was a feeling to it. Something different. The way sound bounced around the hollow was strange. Echoes didn't work right. A branch snapping far off sounded like it was right behind me. My own footsteps seemed to vanish into the ground. After a while, it stopped feeling like I was hearing things and started feeling like things were hearing me. It was probably nothing. I slept light that night. Every little sound seemed bigger, closer. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on the ridge. Not animal footsteps. Slow, deliberate crunches of boots on dead leaves. Someone was up there, moving along the rim of the hollow, but not heading down into it, just pacing. Could have been another camper, but Ridge Hollow wasn't that kind of place. I stayed in my tent, still as possible, listening. The steps would stop for long stretches, then start again. Always staying above me, always moving along the ridge. They circled the hollow once, twice. Hours passed. My fire had died down to nothing but soft orange coals. The dark pressed in thick and heavy. Eventually, the steps stopped for good. I didn't sleep much after that. By morning, the hollow was covered in fog. Thick, low-hanging mist that hugged the ground, making everything feel small and close. I packed up my stove, forced down some cold instant oatmeal, and tried to shake off the nerves. I told myself it was nothing, probably a hunter scouting or some idiot messing around. But then I found the footprints. Not mine. Someone else had come down into the hollow at some point early that morning. The prints were fresh, sharp edges, heading straight toward my camp, then stopping about 20 feet from my tent. They didn't come closer. They just stopped. No turning around, no circling away. The ground was soft enough that more steps would have left marks. It was like whoever it was had just vanished. I checked around more, but the fog made it hard to see beyond a few yards. Every tree looked like someone standing still. Every dark shape could have been a person. But I didn't see anyone. I thought about packing up and leaving, but pride got the better of me. I come out here to get away, and I wasn't going to get scared off by some footprints. So I stayed. The day was uneventful. Fog lifted by mid-morning. Sun never fully came out, but it was bright enough. I walked the hollow, staying close to camp. The woods felt normal again. Birds chirped. Squirrels did squirrel things. By afternoon, I'd convinced myself that the footsteps were probably mine from earlier and I just missed them somehow. That night, the pacing started again. Same slow, deliberate steps along the ridge. Same pattern. One long loop around the hollow, then silence. But this time, there was a new sound. Tapping. Sharp, rhythmic, like metal on rock. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't close at first, but it moved. The tapping started high up on the ridge, then slowly made its way down. Not straight toward me, but angling across the ridge face. Every few steps, tap, 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 like someone carrying something metal, using it to knock on the rocks as they walked. I stayed in my tent. No flashlight, just listening. The tapping stopped somewhere below the ridgeline, maybe halfway up the slope. Then nothing. No footsteps, no sounds at all. Minutes passed. Then a new sound. Breathing. Soft at first, then louder. Labored, wet breaths. Like someone had been running a long time and couldn't catch their air. But it wasn't moving. Just standing out there in the dark. Breathing. The fire had gone out. The cold crept in through the thin tent walls. I didn't dare move. Every breath I took sounded deafening. The breathing outside kept going for what felt like forever. Then slowly it faded. No footsteps leaving. Just gone. I didn't sleep. The first light I packed up. Fast. As I rolled up my tent, I noticed something on one of the nearby trees. Scratches. Deep, straight grooves low to the ground. Too straight to be from an animal. And spaced too close together for a normal hand. It looked like someone had dragged a rake across the bark. But there were no rake marks in the ground. Just on that one tree, about 15 feet from where I'd slept. I left Ridge Hollow without eating, without even finishing packing properly. The hike out was harder than it should have been. The trail felt steeper, the ground looser. Every sound made me whip my head around. Every shadow looked like someone standing still. When I reached my truck, I noticed something else. Mud. Fresh mud smeared across the driver's side door handle. Finger streaks, 5 of them, dragging downward like someone had tried to open it with a muddy hand. I hadn't noticed it when I got there. I would have. It was too obvious. Whoever had been in Ridge Hollow had come out to my truck. Maybe while I was setting up camp. Maybe while I was sleeping. I got in and left fast. Didn't look back. That night, safe at home, I checked the truck again. Mud was still there, drying now. The streaks were clearer. 5 fingers, but not normal. The middle 3 were too close together. The outer 2 were set too wide, like the hand wasn't built right. That detail stuck with me. I never went back to Ridge Hollow. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about it. The steps pacing the ridge, the tapping, the breathing, the footprints that just stopped, the scratches low on the tree, the mud on my truck. It wasn't a ghost. I don't believe in that crap. But something was living out there, not passing through, living there, watching the hollow, pacing, breathing, coming close, but never quite revealing themselves. Not yet. They could have come down to my tent if they wanted. Could have tried the zipper, but they didn't. That scared me more than anything, because it meant they were waiting for what I didn't want to know. I haven't camped alone since.